Imagine two tourists standing in line at the arrivals terminal in, like, the Mallorca airport.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right. So one is a backpacker, totally obsessed with finding eco-friendly hostels and, traveling on a shoestring budget.
The classic budget traveler. Right.
Exactly. And the other is wearing quiet designer clothes, holding a leather weekender bag, and waiting for a transfer to a secluded five-star resort.
Right.
Now, which one of them is actually saving the island's environment and culture?
I mean, the immediate assumption is always the backpacker. Right?
Always. But the data we have today says it is the person heading to the five-star resort. And honestly, it is not even close.
It's an incredibly counterintuitive image, isn't it? Because, well, we have been conditioned for decades to view budget, boots on the ground, travel as culturally authentic.
Oh, 100%.
And then we view high-end resorts as these, like, parasitic entities that just drain local resources. But when you look at the raw macroeconomic data, that conventional wisdom just completely shatters.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at the hidden mechanics of something called slow luxury.
Yeah, slow luxury.
Over the next few minutes, we're going to explore how a surprisingly, tiny fraction of premium tourists is quietly carrying the economic and cultural weight of an entire European region.
And we have a really fascinating stack of materials to get through today.
We really do.
Our primary source is a landmark 2026 economic impact study focused on the Balearic Islands. And this wasn't some quick survey either.
No, not all.
It was presented by essentially Mallorca, alongside the University of the Balearic Islands and the Balearic government, and it was heavily backed by the European Union's Next Generation EU funding mechanism.
And to give all those numbers some, philosophical grounding, we are crossing that data with an incredibly insightful editorial from the Luxure blog.
Right, titled The Architecture of Intent.
Exactly, along with a few granular geographical breakdowns of the local circular economy.
It's a lot to cover.
It is, but our mission for this deep dive is to completely dismantle the myth that luxury travel is just about flashy excess. We want to show you how a highly intentional, data-driven approach to premium hospitality might actually be the singular key to saving the heritage of the places you love to visit. Okay, let's unpack this.
So, to really understand what is happening here, we first have to redefine what luxury actually means in this specific context.
Right, because it's not what people think.
Exactly. The researchers leading this study didn't define a luxury tourist by whether they ordered vintage champagne or rented a yacht. They defined it using cold, hard data.
And not just survey data, which, let's be honest, people lie on all the time.
Oh, constantly.
They used anonymized point-of-sale data from CaixaBank research.
Which is huge.
It is. They tracked actual international credit cards swiping at local payment terminals across the islands to see who was spending what and exactly where they were spending it.
And the contrast they uncovered is staggering. I mean, think about the daily expenditure of an average international visitor to the Balearics. The data shows it sits at about 46 euros a day.
46 euros. Think about your own travel budget for a second.
It doesn't go very far.
No. If you're spending 46 euros a day on a European vacation, you're buying a coffee, grabbing a pre-made sandwich at a bakery, maybe paying for a public bus ticket, and sitting on a free public beach.
Right.
Your physical footprint, the space you take up, the infrastructure you use is quite wide, but your actual financial injection into the local community is incredibly shallow.
Precisely. Now, contrast that with the luxury tourist. CaixaBank isolated this group by defining them as visitors whose daily spend is at least 10 times higher than the median.
10 times?
Yeah. The data show that this premium guest spends an average of 731 euros daily.
731 euros a day. I'm trying to even map out how someone spends that on a Tuesday without just buying, high-end jewelry.
Right. It has to be experiential spending.
Exactly. You aren't just buying things, you're buying access, privacy, and highly curated local experiences.
It is an entirely different economic reality. And this isn't a brief post-pandemic revenge travel spike either. The study traces a steady, deliberate growth pattern.
Which is really important to note.
Right. Back in 2014, guests staying in five-star hotels made up just 3.97% of the total hotel market in the Balearic Islands. By 2025, that number had practically doubled, reaching 7.84%.
I was trying to visualize this shift from sheer volume to high value, and it made me think of watering a garden.
Oh, okay. How so?
Well, mass tourism, like chasing millions of visitors who only spend 46 euros a day, is like hitting a delicate flower bed with a high-pressure fire hose.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a great image.
Right. You are blasting the destination with sheer volume. It causes massive cultural erosion, the local infrastructure gets overwhelmed, and because the ground can't absorb it fast enough, most of the actual economic benefit just runs off into the street
It
anyway.
just washes away.
Exactly. But this new wave of slow luxury operates like a perfectly calibrated drip irrigation system.
That is a very apt way to look at it, especially regarding the erosion of local culture.
It's significantly less water overall, the volume of people drops, but because the delivery is targeted, intentional, and localized, there is far more absorption and genuine growth for the local ecosystem.
Well, what's fascinating here is that this transition wasn't a happy accident.
Really?
No, this was a conscious, strategic pivot by the Balearic Islands. They looked at the strain on their roads, their water supply, and their beaches, and realized they couldn't survive indefinitely on the fire hose method.
They were drowning.
Exactly. They needed to refine their audience and practice hospitality as an art of curation rather than, an industry of mass extraction.
But let me pause and push back on this because there is a very obvious counterargument here.
Sure, go ahead.
My immediate assumption, and I'm sure you listening might be wondering the exact same thing, is that this 731 euros a day just stays locked behind the manicured gates of these international five-star hotel chains.
Right, the insular resort myth.
Yeah. Isn't this just a fancy eco-washed rebrand of trickle-down economics? Are the islands just catering to the ultra-rich while regular working-class locals get priced out of their own neighborhoods?
It's the single most important question to ask when discussing high-end development, because historically, luxury enclaves have been extractive.
Highly extractive.
But the 2018 input-output data from this specific study proves the exact opposite is happening in the Balearics. The researchers mapped exactly how this wealth leaks out of the resorts and flows directly into the local streets.
And the breakdown of where that money goes is wild.
It really is. For instance, fine gastronomy, which means local restaurants, regional chefs, and local agricultural suppliers, accounts for 17.72% of the premium sector's economic production.
Wow.
Yeah, and leisure activities capture another 22.78%. These guests are not sitting by the hotel pool ordering generic room service.
Right.
They are actively going out, hiring local boating guides, and eating at independent establishments.
The category that really caught my eye, though, was the impact on art and cultural services. Between 2014 and 2018, the luxury segment's economic impact on local arts and culture surged from 13.12% to 18.49%.
It's a massive jump.
It is. But wait, let me challenge that data point, too.
Okay.
How much of that 18% is just like wealthy guests buying expensive private art to hang in their summer villas versus actually funding community heritage? Does the study distinguish between a rich guy buying a painting and an actual cultural benefit?
That is a crucial distinction. And yes, the input-output matrix tracks the wider supply chain of those purchases. It's not just gallery sales.
Okay.
It includes patronage of local performing arts, funding for intimate heritage tours, and the restoration of historical sites.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, these guests are paying a premium for access to authentic cultural history, which creates a direct financial incentive for the destination to preserve that history rather than, bulldoze it for another cheap souvenir shop.
That makes a lot of sense.
And when you zoom out to the macroeconomic anchor of all this, the sheer scale of the impact becomes undeniable.
Lay on me.
The study found that roughly 27% of all non-resident expenditure is funneled into this premium sphere. That 27% infuses a staggering 2.3 billion euros into the island's economy.
2.3 billion euros coming from just a fraction of the visitors.
And here is the answer to your question about the working class locals.
Right, the pricing out issue.
That single slice of the economic pie supports 7.75% of the total production of the Balearic Islands and precisely 37,296 local jobs.
37,000 jobs.
Yes. That is 7.35% of all employment in the region, completely sustained by less than 8% of the tourists.
So the reason it's not just trickle-down economics is because the money is directly employing a massive chunk of the population in high-value services, rather than just like low-wage seasonal housekeeping jobs.
Exactly. It shifts the paradigm from sustaining a community through sheer volume of visitors to sustaining them through the quality of employment.
Quality over quantity.
Right. And we connect this to the bigger picture. We have to look at the ultimate global stress test for this theory, The year 2020.
The pandemic shutdowns.
When global travel collapsed, the mass market faltered entirely. The infrastructure built for millions of budget travelers sat empty and hemorrhaged money.
It was devastating for tourist economies.
It was. But the premium sector held its ground. In fact, its market share actually rose to 9.03% during that crisis.
Wait, it went up?
It went up. Because luxury travelers have greater means and flexibility, they continued to travel, seeking isolation and high-end privacy. This segment proved to be a recession-proof stabilizer.
That's incredible.
Yeah, when the broader market fell apart, this incredibly small demographic kept tens of thousands of local families financially afloat.
That economic resilience is incredible to see backed up by data. But it brings us to a really tricky paradox.
Oh.
We've established that premium tourism is economically sustainable for the locals. But is it environmentally sustainable for the physical islands? Like, do guests spending 700 euros a day actually care about the dirt, the water, and the energy of the places they are visiting?
That brings us to the study's deep dive into the circular economy.
Wait, just to make sure we're all on the same page and not getting bogged down in institutional jargon. When you say circular economy, we're talking about a closed-loop system, right?
Right.
A model where waste is aggressively minimized, resources are continuously reused, and nothing just goes to a landfill. How does a massive five-star hotel actually pull that off?
Well, simply put, they have the capital to invest in the infrastructure.
Ah, right. Green tech is expensive.
Very. This study found that at an institutional level, as hotel star categories increase, so does their adoption of environmental measures.
Okay.
Independent luxury hotels, because they have agility, lead the pack in energy efficiency, think geothermal cooling or advanced solar integration.
Oh, that's cool.
Meanwhile, the larger luxury chains use their scale to take the lead in complex waste management and water recycling systems.
So the hotels themselves have the money and the mandate to be green. But what about the human beings checking into the rooms?
That is where it gets interesting.
Because the data tracks some very specific demographic behaviors, and it is delightfully counterintuitive.
It really is.
First, at a broad cultural level, German tourists are apparently the most proactive when it comes to the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle.
There's a strong cultural predisposition toward environmentalism there, yes.
Right.
But the fascinating data twist appears when you look at hotel tiers. Guests staying in lower-tier hotels, like the 1 to 3 star range, actually show a higher natural predisposition toward circular behaviors.
Like recycling, turning off lights, reducing food waste.
Exactly.
Which honestly makes perfect sense. If you are traveling on a strict budget, your baseline mindset is already geared toward conserving resources.
You're naturally more frugal.
Yeah. But here's where it gets really interesting. The researchers looked at Generation Z residents traveling as tourists within the islands. Now, conventional wisdom says that younger, highly educated, wealthier Gen Z travelers should be the most eco-conscious demographic on the planet.
That is the assumption every marketing department makes. They grew up with climate change awareness.
Exactly. But the data shows the exact opposite reality.
It's kind of shocking.
It is.
Right.
Among Gen Z, having higher education and a higher income actually translates to a lower implementation of circular practices. They recycle less.
Wait.
Less. They waste more. They leave the air conditioning running with the windows open.
Unless there is a very specific psychological trigger.
Yes. The data points out that this wealthy, educated, younger demographic only engages in these green practices if it fulfills a personal sense of responsibility or makes them, quote, feel good about themselves.
It is entirely driven by the ego factor.
It's the ultimate ego factor. It's like someone who buys an incredibly expensive, eco-friendly electric car.
Right.
The underlying technology might be great for the environment, but let's be honest, they would never buy it if the car didn't have a massive, instantly recognizable logo on the front that told all their neighbors exactly how wealthy and eco-friendly they are.
It's a status symbol.
Exactly. Well, sustainability has to function as a visible status symbol. It completely shatters the idea that having money and an advanced degree automatically equals environmental responsibility. It doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
It requires highly intentional framing by the businesses.
And the high-end hospitality industry understands this psychology perfectly.
They know their audience.
They really do. The study notes that when premium hotels make their green initiatives visible, clear, and elegantly aligned with the guest experience, it actually reduces price sensitivity.
Let's clarify that by reducing price sensitivity, you mean inelastic demand.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the guests don't care how high the price tag goes as long as the sustainability is part of the show.
Exactly that. Luxury guests will happily pay a massive premium if the sustainability is woven into the status of their experience.
Wow.
They want to buy into the feeling of being a responsible steward of the land, provided that stewardship is presented to them on a silver platter as part of the luxury package.
They are paying to feel virtuous.
Precisely.
So if these travelers are so motivated by this status-driven stewardship, where exactly are they going? The Balearic Islands are huge and diverse. Where on the map does this intentional luxury physically take place?
Let's start with the largest island, Mallorca. The capital city of Palma captures 27.3% of the entire national luxury card market.
Wow, almost a third.
Yeah, and when you look at Palma, it makes sense.
It does. You have the incredible Luxure Cathedral right on the water.
It's stunning.
It's this majestic, centuries-old Gothic masterpiece that anchors the entire bay. You can easily imagine these premium guests walking those ancient stone streets in the shadow of that architecture.
They are interacting with preserved physical heritage.
Right, rather than generic modern strip malls. The environment justifies the spending.
The architecture absolutely sets the tone. And right next door is the municipality of Calvia, which actually leads all the islands with that incredible average daily spend of 729 euros we talked about earlier.
Right, right.
It captures 27.2% of the luxury spend.
And what about the other islands, the Pitiusas group?
Over in Ibiza, luxury transactions account for a quarter, 25.3% of all foreign tourist spending.
Still a huge chunk.
It is, but if you want to find the true epicenter of this specific slow luxury phenomenon, you have to look at the serene enclave of St. Joseph de Satelaya.
Oh, it's an incredibly beautiful, rugged area.
It is. And in St. Joseph, premium spending makes up a massive 30% of its total international economic intake.
30%.
Think about that. Nearly a third of all the money coming in from abroad is coming from this highly intentional, high-spending demographic.
Why there, specifically? Actually, wait, this connects perfectly back to the philosophy we read in that Luxure editorial, the architecture of intent.
Yes, exactly.
They argue that this modern wave of high-end travel isn't about popping bottles of champagne in a crowded nightclub. It's about a deep sensory connection to the local land.
Okay.
It's paying a premium to experience the scent of wild rosemary being harvested on a hillside. It's knowing the precise origin of the local olive oil being poured over your dinner and knowing the farmer who pressed it was paid a thriving wage.
It's highly curated authenticity.
Yeah, the physical geography of a place like St. Joseph, quiet, rich in agriculture, intensely private, dictates the way the money is spent.
I think this raises an important philosophical question regarding the future of global travel.
I agree. What is it?
What does it actually mean to truly be a guest in someone else's home?
Oh, that's good.
As Luxure eloquently points out, hospitality cannot just be a transactional exchange of money for a bed. It has to be an act of stewardship.
Stewardship, exactly.
True luxury in the modern era is leaving a place more meaningful, more economically stable, and more ecologically protected than you found it.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? I think the core takeaway is that whether you are spending 50 euros a day backpacking or 700 euros a day at a boutique villa, your financial footprint is voting on what survives in a destination.
Absolutely.
Every single euro is a ballot cast. Are you funding mass-produced plastic souvenirs imported from across the globe? Or are you handing your money directly to local artisans and chefs who are keeping regional culture alive?
The Essentially Mallorca study definitively proves that when a region is brave enough to shift its focus away from the sheer, overwhelming volume of tourists and focus instead on the depth of their intention, it works.
The drip irrigation instead of the fire hose?
Exactly. They can protect their economy, their natural environment, and their cultural soul. Those 37,000 local jobs supported by this premium segment aren't just statistics on an EU spreadsheet.
No.
They are actual lifelines for cultural continuity.
It is a total paradigm shift for anyone who loves to travel. Because, let's face it, we have spent decades celebrating the democratization of travel.
We have.
We've championed the idea that ultra-cheap, 20-euro budget flights and massive mega hotels are a global victory because they allow absolutely everyone to see the world.
And there is certainly a valid argument for making travel accessible to lower income brackets. It broadens perspectives.
Oh, absolutely. But I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over based on everything we've unpacked from this data today.
Let's hear it.
If the numbers prove that slow luxury, this high-value, lower-volume, highly intentional style of tourism, is what actually funds the preservation of local art, protects delicate environments from erosion, and stabilizes working-class jobs during a crisis. Does our modern obsession with ultra-cheap mass global travel actually do more harm than good to the very places we claim to love? Are we literally loving these beautiful destinations to death just because we want a bargain?
It forces you to look in the mirror and reconsider what a good deal on a vacation really costs the local community in the grand scheme of things.
It really does. It changes the entire calculus of packing a bag. Next time you head to the airport, think deeply about the mark you're going to leave behind. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of intent. We will catch you next time.